Hi, I'm Laurel and I made this. So I'm going to be showing you how I made this clever forest holiday miniature Japanese house. But it really should be called Laurel Waits for Glue to Dry. So let's see what's inside the box. There's a whole bunch of bags stuffed full of all kinds of things, wood pieces, fabric, little prop pieces, you get the idea. And pieces to make the floors and walls. And this is the instruction booklet. It tells you how to do everything with just photos and illustration pages and templates, which of course I scanned ahead of time for good measure. Kind of a cool thing about this kit is that it came with its own set of tools. A ruler, a box cutter, its own set of tweezers, and a screwdriver for some reason, and a pair of scissors. But the scissors were really bad, so we're just going to throw those away. And here's my tools that I'm going to use. Now because of my customizations on this one, I needed a few extra. And so as not to repeat my stain mess from my Billy miniature, some gloves, which I don't end up using. And my own fancy tweezers and sanding stuff. And paint. I really started this project with all the best intentions. I was going to take out all the pieces, compare them to the inventory sheet, and organize them, but I quickly got overwhelmed and in the end just made everything way more confusing. There's just so many pieces. So let's get down to it. I had to wallpaper the main wall, and let me tell you, I've learned glue like this is not ideal for gluing paper on stuff. It totally wrinkled up and looked really gross, and we can't have that. Enter unplanned customization number 1. I grabbed some cardstock that was a similar color and used my Cricut cutter, with the help of my scanned pieces, to cut out a new wall covering, windows and all. I did this because the cardstock is thicker and didn't bubble up like the other stuff did. Once my wall was newly covered, I had to cut out some opening bits and poke some holes in it. Since the main wall is now ready, it's time to work on this window wall. So there's this wood frame that I have to stuff inside that hole, and stuff I did. The piece didn't fit perfectly, and I basically just tried to jam it in there, and well, I broke it. But it's okay, I'll just get it in place, then put a bunch of glue on it. And now this frame goes on the outside. Looks pretty cute. And you can't even see the break, except you totally can. Now this is where the bulk of my planned custom work takes place, the floor. I'm not using this picture sheet for anything except for taking measurements. And why is that? Because I'm putting in a real wood floor, like a boss. I marked out where all the different floor pieces went, then got to cutting and gluing these coffee stir sticks. I started with the outside porch. That stick I taped on there so that I can keep the pieces lined up and keep them on their respected side of the building. Once the glue mostly dried, I used watercolor to stain the wood. Now I can do the interior floor. Unlike the outside porch, these sticks were staggered so it looked like, I don't know, a normal wood floor. Something I did a little different is I sanded down this floor when the glue dried so it'd be nice and smooth. I then sealed the whole thing with Sculpey glaze so the watercolor didn't wash off. Not the most conventional, but it's what I had on hand. Those big holes on the floor I'm leaving in there, that's where I'm going to put some Tatami Mats. So for the mats, I took this piece of fabric and stained it with some coffee so it'd be tatami-ish color, and then I just had to measure out the sizes of the mats I needed. To bind the mats, I colored some masking tape with a marker and then cut out and covered the edges with the tape. Over and over until I had all the mats I needed. I could then just glue them in place. Cute little tatami mats! Now that the big downstairs pieces are done, I can make the top floor. First things first, making the light fixture. This was much fiddlier than I expected it to be. Actually, this whole kit was. I used toothpicks on this one to try to make those slats evenly spaced, which worked, except they sort of dried on there, so I had to carefully pry the toothpicks out after the whole thing dried. This tiny square is the top floor. Since I wasn't using the paper piece for it, I painted one side to match the color. 3 coats later, I can put the wood down on the top floor. I let the wood hang off the side on this one since I could just cut off the extra after it dried. You can actually see me sand the floor here. Woo! And then I just finished it like before. Something cool about this kit is it lights up, So that means I gotta glue in some lights. Well, one light right now. And I mean glue it in. That's how they do it in real life, right? Right? This was probably my favorite part, making the outside ground. I know it's kind of silly. I didn't mind gluing this sheet down because I had plans it was going to cover it all up anyway. I wanted to make these entryway stones look like real stones, so I cut up an egg carton. Yeah, this is what it's like living with me. Anyway, I cut the carton into stone-sized pieces and glued them on. Then I sprinkled a cork coffee ground mixture into the cracks. Well, finally, I used some paint to color the rocks a bit. Voila! Realistic-y rocks! So after adding a few little wood trim pieces to the wall, it was time to add it to the floor. Getting it to stick while the glue dried? Well, that's another story. It's time now to add in a bunch of downstairs stuff, starting with this cupboard. I cut out cardstock to make this cupboard too, instead of the printed paper. What can I say? I just wanted it to have more dimension and stuff to look more realistic. And while the glue dried, I assembled the little staircase. In they go! I had to prop up the cupboard with washers while the glue dried. Once again, I was in a battle with my arch nemesis, dry time. Welcome to the template sheet. This dude is really important from here on out because it's used for all these little tiny fiddly bits that are coming up. So this is this exterior wall thing. Basically the paper is glued between these two, scratch that, 3 wood pieces, but it's super important because with that piece together, the top floor can be installed. I just have to feed the light wires through the side and glue the little guy on. And wait for it to dry. Remember this window? It can finally get glued on. Problem is, I didn't account for the extra height from adding that wood floor, so I tried to sand down the window piece and it didn't work. It probably would have eventually, but I think we all know by now I'm not that patient. While I think on how to fix that, I tried to fill in that broken spot some more. Did it work? Well, it doesn't really matter. Once I put on the window shade, it covered it up anyway. I think we can finally save the building exteriors altogether. Well, I take that back. This arbor overhang thing needs to be made. If you watched my tea shop miniature video, you've seen me do this before. I used a pearlized white paint and dry brushed it on the corrugated cardboard roof. That way, it makes it look more like metal. This arbor was pretty fragile until I glued it in place. One of the pieces fell off when I was trying to glue it on. It was also ridiculously unstable on there, so I had to tape it down while it dried, because gravity isn't always my friend. I bet you thought I was done with that floor. Well, you'd be wrong. After sleeping on it, I realized it looked too clunky with the scale of the piece, so I ripped it out and replaced it with some different mats I made. Wondering how I made them? Well, do I have a treat for you. I didn't measure them right and they were too big, so... Okay, how I made the mats. I used my Cricut to cut out these green pieces on heat press vinyl, double-checked my measurements, then ironed it onto some more fabric I stained with coffee. I then taped them to some cardstock and glued them in place. They look way better now. So this back wall has some decorative trim pieces that need to be put on. I did a dry fitting to make sure I knew where each piece went since some of them were so similar. Tweezers were definitely my friend here. I painted some coffee stir sticks and glued them to the edge of the top floor to hide the edges of where I put that wood floor down. To finish up the downstairs, I needed to make a whole lot of little things, starting with some Shoji Screens. The paper they sent in the kit was so wrinkled, I couldn't use that, so I grabbed a piece of tracing paper and used that instead. Then onto the furnishings, which consist of a shelf, a table, a chair, and a fabric screen. Then we're on to making some floor cushions. I cut padding out of the provided thick felt, then used a template for the fabric and, just glued them together. Let me tell you, as someone who sews a lot, it feels very strange just gluing cushions together. Now, one of these cushions was for the chair I assembled earlier, and wouldn't you know it, I glued it together wrong. So I had to cut the cushion for that one down so it didn't stick out over the edge. In the end, it still stuck out a little. Oh well. I couldn't wait to make this cute, tiny food. First is this sushi roll. I couldn't figure out what fabric was supposed to be used for the rice part, so I just grabbed a scrap from my stash. I wanted my sushi roll to have some nori around the outside, so I just grabbed a scrap of dark green as well. It then got filled with some tiny strips of felt. Let me tell you, I would be an awful sushi chef. I had a hard time keeping the roll together while the glue dried, so I clamped it, which ended up squishing it. So while cutting it, I tried to squish it back round, and it kinda worked. Then they just got glued to this plate. The onigiri is just triangles of a stiff felt glued together. They had little paper pieces to wrap around for the nori, but it was black and paper, so I cut out tiny pieces of the green fabric and wrapped that around instead. Next, I needed to make a rope bowl by coiling this paper twine thing around, and getting it to stick while coiling was pretty much impossible, so I ended up just slathering it in glue and hoping it'd dry clear, which it did. Little red beads then glued in there to look like apples. There's these little cup beads too. So cute! Well, I wasn't done coiling yet. I still had to coil some floor mats. Same process as before, slather with glue. I put some tape on the template so I could use as much glue as I wanted without sticking it to the paper. Using my noggin this time around. Moving to the upstairs, I have to make another light, and this one I have to wrap this bead with fabric, which proved to be a giant pain. I had to do it twice just to get the fabric to stick, but once I got it, I could put the LED light in it. One thing about this kit I found frustrating was how similar so many of the pieces were. I had to measure the pieces and compare them to the item sheet to make sure I had the right one, but a lot of the pieces were only like a millimeter or two away in size, so I glued the wrong ones together, or conversely, the wrong sides, several times, and just had to pray the pieces wouldn't break when I pried them apart. Or, glue things to the wrong piece of wood. So I used my Cricut again to cut out the details of the closet doors and drawers like I did for the cabinet downstairs, which might seem silly since it just looks like a black outline, but I'm a silly girl that does silly things. I originally glued my closet paper to the wrong piece of wood, and because the bedspread was light, I had to glue a piece of white paper on top to hide my shame. Once I put the mattress on the bed, I realized I glued the base with the drawers on the wrong side, so I pried it off and glued it to the other side. Funny story, I had it on the... Well, then I installed all the furniture and then the railing. Can't go falling off. Finally, now all the furniture is done and I can make all the accessories. This green fabric covers these little dowels which make pillows for the bed. Seems comfy. One of these wood things is like a side table and the other is a shelf unit, but both get these cute little boxes with cute little handles. So this floral box, let me tell you about this floral box. It didn't fit where it was supposed to. At first I thought I glued the table unit together wrong, like the chair, but no, it was the box. I couldn't easily cut it shorter, so I went to my scan and just printed out a new one that I could cut down smaller. And this is why I scanned the sheets first. Why I have to wrap wire to make a fan, I'll never know. But this has to be the most dangerous fan of all time. It'd take off a hand if it were actual size. One of the reasons I bought this kit was for the sewing machine. Isn't it so cute? And so is this tiny book. I realize at this point you're probably like, Laurel, aren't you done yet? And I kind of felt the same way. But almost there. All that's left is the outside stuff. Starting with this paper lantern, which is actually just rope coiled around a bead. And it was way easier than I thought it would be. And it turned out really cool. There's also this really cute Go table set that goes on the porch. And some green sitting cushions. I'm really bad at real plants, so let's hope these small felt ones go together better. These actually went together with a hope and a prayer. I mean, the scraps were so tiny. I just dropped the felt on the glue and hoped it looked like a plant when the glue dried. I think they turned out really cute and way better than I thought they would. The very last pieces for the outside I worked on was this water wheel. Why a water wheel when there's no water? I'll never know. And these tiny little Geta sandals. As you'd expect, these are a little difficult because they're so tiny. I decided to use a glue stick to put the template on the felt instead of just tape because it'd hold the whole piece while still being able to be pulled off easily once it's cut. The kit came with tiny wood bases, so I just put glue on the edges of the felt piece and stuck them on, which was a challenge because, again, dry time is a cruel mistress. I put on the toe piece first and clamped it with these tweezers, then the sides while squinching them up enough so a tiny foot could get inside. I'm pretty sure I put the sandal tops on backwards. Hey, remember way back when I realized that the side with the window was too high? This is how I ended up fixing it. The width of the stir sticks were the same as the walls, and that the height was perfect because, well, it's a stir stick height above the other wall. So I painted them the color of the balcony and glued them to the top to even it out. Hooray! The kit came with some white rocks for the outside, but it was such a small, measly amount that it would just look sad. So I bought some white decorative sand to put down to look like white rocks. I just slathered glue on the ground, avoiding that spot for the water wheel, sprinkled on the rocks, and made sure they covered everything. Then after the glue dried, I shook and brushed the loose rocks off. So before we can load in the stuff, I have to get the electricity working, which is new for me. It's actually pretty simple. You expose all the wire ends, wrap all the gray ones together, then wrap all the white ones together, then attach the wires onto the battery box. They provided white tape to wrap around the exposed wires. Then you just stuff all that in the hole, which is the back of that closet upstairs. The battery box didn't fit in the hole well, so I just used double-sided tape to attach it. And magic. That's really cool! Now my favorite part, loading in everything. First, we have to put in these screens. The instructions show the decorative wood facing to the outside, but some research told me that the wood faced the inside traditionally, so suck it, instructions. To put the wall art that came with the kit on, I flipped it on its side and hoped I put everything on level. Now we'll put in this shelf, a teapot, one of the sitting mats. Oh, excuse me. Why am I doing this in the dark when you can't see? Bam! Told you I was proud of myself. And now it's just putting things all together where they're supposed to go. So the kit has this pretty little plant and a few decorative rocks to spice up the outside. It was really hard to get that tree plant to stand up, so I just glued it to the side of the house. And with our little Getas in place, it's finally done. Overall, I just adore this little house, especially my little Tatami Mats. I mean, I should. It only took me 3 tries. All the little details make it really special, even if they were a little fiddly to put together. Now, I just have to find a faster drying glue that doesn't dry too fast. Compared to my tea shop, which only took me about a week to put together, this was a much longer build. It took me about 3 weeks to finish, but I think it's worth it. Plus, how often can you say you wired a whole house by yourself? Well, thanks so much for watching. It really means a lot, and I hope this video inspires you to try one of these kits yourself. If you'd like to see me stumble through more crafts and projects, just hit those like and subscribe buttons. Thanks so much again for watching. I'll see you in the next one. Bye!